Implementing Model View Controller with BlazorMvc here on Programming with Palermo.
You are programming with Palermo. You deliver software. You need to move fast, deliver quality, and run your software with confidence. Stay tuned for timeless solutions, simple methods, and topics that will propel you forward. And now your host, lifelong programmer, author, teacher, coach, Christian, and charismatic speaker, Jeffrey Palermo.
Welcome back to another episode of Programming with Palermo. I'm excited that you're here. We've been doing a lot with our sample application, a church bulletin application that would print printed bulletins for a church service or projected on the screen of all the events going on at the church, Bible studies, events, what have you. And it's a very simple application right now, but it's Blazor WebAssembly. We've done a lot with the structure of this application. We have a multi-part series, how to implement onion architecture and the proper Visual Studio solution structure, um, automated builds, integration tests, unit tests, the private build. I go through getting that build going as an integration build on Azure Pipelines and GitHub Actions, both in previous episodes. But now we're going to refactor some of the default template stuff we get in a Blazor WebAssembly new project template, and we're going to pull out the controlling logic from the view logic. We're going to use a library called BlazorMvc to implement a model view controller pattern into this application so that as we go forward, we don't end up with just super huge Blazor component files that have decision logic and code working with data mixed in the same file as HTML code and CSS code that essentially makes the screen look like it's supposed to look. And it's a really old pattern. If you've never heard of MVC before, it's outside of the scope of this episode. We're going to assume that you have, but just do a little bit of research on the history of the model view controller pattern going back to the 1970s. If you need to do that, but we're going to implement it here. We're going to pull out the logic that works with data and decision tree logic, and we're going to separate controllers from views and see how that's implemented using the Blazor MVC open source library that's available on NuGet. So let's get into it. So let's go ahead and implement Blazor MVC. We have our GitHub application, our church bulletin application that we've been working on. In many of the previous episodes, we implemented onion architecture and various types of testing, but let's just go ahead and do that. Let's look at the issue, and we are going to refactor the Blazor component to MVC. So let's open up our issue number 10, and then over on the right, we can create a branch, and it'll give us a name that's good enough. And so let's go ahead and create that branch. Okay, we don't actually need this because Visual Studio gives us a great way to do it. So let's just make sure to pull the latest, and then we can come in here and look at, there's our branch. So let's go ahead and check out. Okay, we're on the right branch. Let's go to Solution Explorer, and we have our Blazor WebAssembly application in UI.client. Let's just run this application real quick so that we can see that it's pretty much the standard, except we've added a Fetch Church Bulletin application page. So we open it up, we've got our health checks. Okay, it started up on 7174. So let's go ahead and open it up here. Localhost 71. Or did I read this wrong? Yeah, 7174. Okay, that must be for last time. 7174. Okay. And there's the page. We put some cruft in there, counter, fetch data, and fetch church bulletin. Okay, because this is pulling from a database that we have in the application. So we currently have just regular counter, the components, the Blazor components that are there by default. And this was the new one that we added. Pretty simple. The index, of course, we have hello world. You can clean that up, and fetch data is the one that comes with the template. All right, so we're going to implement BlazorMvc, and the project that needs it is here. Let's go to NuGet, manage NuGet packages, and I'm not gonna give a presentation on BlazorMvc, but you'll see it. It allows us to separate our controllers from view logic. BlazorMvc. Oh, that's installed Blazor. Okay, there we go. And let's go ahead and install this. Pretty simple, pretty small package. All right, let's start out with the, we're just gonna leave this guy alone. It doesn't have any logic, but let's go to counter, and we're gonna start. Let's split. Of course, this is the only logic that we need to split. So essentially, when we get to things like this that actually call into web services, and of course fetch church bulletin, all the items that need to be displayed for a printed or projected bulletin at church, all the events, all the Bible studies, things like that, you got to have logic. Now the logic is pretty simple, but it only gets more complicated from here. So we don't want to have controlling logic and code that works with data and decides how to make decisions around data mixed in with the code that's just formatting how it looks. And sometimes we want to swap out the view. So let's go ahead and just start with the counter controller. And I'm going to start by creating a new class. Actually, I want to get my shortcuts. Let me open up Karnak so you can see what shortcuts I'm pressing with ReSharper. So that's Alt Insert. I'm going to call it counter controller. All right, there it is. And counter controller with BlazorMvc, there's a new base class, controller component base, and we actually use the generic form to give it the type of the view, and we're going to convert our counter component into a view. Of course, it doesn't compile right now because we have to. Actually, let me show you the error. The type counter has to be view component base. So let's just make it compile. Let's just make it compile by changing the little bit at the top. Inherits. Okay, view component base. There we go. All right, let me save that and come back here. Okay, now it compiles. And so now we need to start putting some of the controller stuff in here. And first of all, we want to look at what counter has. And okay, we're going to increment the count. And so let's just code forward. You know, if we don't care what the view does, then we need what the current count is. We need the variable. So let's just do that. Current count equals 0, and we need to initialize the view that we now have. So let's do that. So we're going to override on view initialized. So this is the life cycle of our view. We don't have to worry about doing that, but we now have a view property, and we're going to say, let's carry it forward. Model equals current count. Okay. And so model, it doesn't contain a definition for model. And so we're going to go ahead and fix that. And we are going to, we can just retrofit this. We can say public, public model and get set. All right, so now, and I'm just going to get rid of all this for now. Increment the current count, that's going to be model. Make it compile. Oh, we need that there. And increment, we still need this. We do still need this, but we can actually, create property. We actually need it to be an action. You know what? I know exactly what it needs to be. Public. It needs to be a callback. It needs to be some sort of delegate. And an action or a func. Does it need parameters? No, it just needs to be called. Okay, on increment. All right, so we're going to make that a get set. And if we take this on increment, well, now it's kind of like an event. And what are you barking at? Restarting the application, of course. There we go. So we're closed now. And do we compile at this point? Just to keep it running. Come on, what are you working on? Why are you taking so long? Let's go over here. Okay, counter controller. We have our current count. Let's just code forward on this. So we have view initialized. We need the model to be set to a particular thing, but we also need to be able to get this callback. So, you know what? Let's just make it here. Increment count. Oops. Increment count. And let's just generate that here. We're going to create the method. Private void. Okay. And whenever that gets clicked, then we're just going to increment our variable and we're going to tell the view to reset it. So this way the controller has the logic. What? My intelligence? My keyboard? Intelligence? Okay. I think that is the basics there. None must contain non-null value. Okay. Let's see here. And then we also need to get rid of this. All right, no longer are we going to have the view control the route because that really is a controller concern. That's a controller concern. So let's take this and let's go back over and let's make sure that the controller controls the route. So the app page variables, they just compile down to route components anyway. So let's do that. Counter. Okay. Let's clean up using statements. We have counter controller. Just looking through this. Okay. And the last thing I want to do is I want to rename counter controller. So let's see if we compile. And this is interesting. Visual Studio. This is, why aren't you building? All right, let's cancel this build. What is going on? Rebuild. Are you gonna do it now? You happy? Sometimes I talk to my computer. All right, done building that project. You gonna finish? All right, I had to restart Visual Studio, but here goes. Let's go ahead and rename counter to counter view. And now the type is changed, but we come over here and counter view is what we need to do. Save, let's compile, and counter view gets on the call stack first. And so let's go ahead and Control F5. It's not going to run just yet. Okay. Web server's listening on this port, 7174. All right. 7174 counter, and that's because we do F12, counter controller is not in iServices collection just yet. And so we need to do a little bit in our iServices collection to get this started up, but this is what you will receive. So let's go and do that.
Programming with Palermo is brought to you by ClearMeasure, a software architecture company that empowers .NET teams to be self-sufficient, moving fast, delivering quality, and running their software with confidence in Azure. If your team has a project that's too important to be delayed or derailed, ClearMeasure can help, while keeping your team in the driver's seat and growing in capability. Click on clearmeasure.com for more information. If you are an architect or .NET engineer aspiring to become an architect, check out clearmeasure.com/careers. Now, back to the show.
In order to do that, we're going to come over to Program here, and we need to add builder.services right here. Just add a new line, and it's IUI bus. BlazorMvc has a mechanism for all components to communicate to others in a page, and so that's just one part of it. And of course, views to controllers and controllers to views is explicit, but it comes with an automatic extra that we're not showing right now for pages to communicate with each other. So let's do this. Control Shift B. Let's restart this application. Let's see if our application is happy now. All right, home, controller, count, and look, the controller is perfectly happy. And this counter page, it's the same URL, and fetch data is the old way, and counter has been refactored. So let's go ahead and just refactor fetch data, and let's see what that looks like. So fetch data again is this. So let's refactor this one. Let's go to pages, and later on, you want to refactor out controllers, refactor out views. It's totally up to you, but let's go ahead and create a fetch data controller. All right, there we go. Remember, the steps are controller component base. I'm just going to CCB of type fetch data. That's our existing view, and of course, following the compiler errors, the fetch data. Is my Karnak not running? I did a Shift Alt L. There we go. Now I can go up to fetch data, and fetch data. We don't need the page. We're going to get rid of that right after we do at inherits view component base. All right, there we go. We're going to get rid of this fetch data, and let's go back over to our controller and add the route, and that's going to be fetch data, same route. Okay, so with our forecast, let's just look at what our view's been doing. It has the forecast, so of course we need to bring that over, and then it has a call to JSON. So let's just take that and let's just pull it over, and let's put it here. And then of course we need a little bit of on initialized, and this is going to be our line of code. So override on initialized. There we go. And we're just going to use this guy. Okay. And let's see. A little bit of, we need some using statements. Okay, at the top. And which one is it? Or HTTP dot. There we go. So just realized we get this in the fetch data component. So just back off over here. We are injecting this, so we need the corollary. So let me Stop that and let me just inject that property. All right, so now we have our HTTP property. We can import the namespace and let's put the async keyword there. Oh, async keyword there. Now it's all happy. We save. We're calling out to our web service at that point. We're getting it back and forecast. And so we need to set the view. All right. We have our data. So now we need to say view dot forecast equals forecast. All right. And we're going to code forward. So we're going to create property and it's going to be right there. Not sure why it gives me 3. All right. So are we in the right view? Yes. Let's get rid of this code. And then wherever we have this, if forecast equals null, no, if forecast equals null. And, you know, by convention, we could call it model because in so many places, you know, we could say view.model, but you can have multiple model properties. And so if it makes sense to have a single model just by convention, because so many people are used to other model view controller frameworks having a convention of the model being strongly typed and of a particular name, but you could say view.forecast or view.model, whatever you like. All right, so did we take care of everything that we need to in this particular? Let's compile. Okay, and let's go ahead and rename this guy to view fetch data view. And then in the controller, of course, we're going to have to do it here. Control B and Control F5. Start the application. All right, there's the application. Counter control is happy. Fetch data is happy. That's great. And let's do our final component here, which is the fetch church bulletin. It's very similar to fetch data, but it calls it from a different web service. Let's just do it anyway. So for pages, we're going to call new class fetch church bulletin controller, and there we go. And it's going to be counter controller base, and the view type is going to be fetch church bulletin for now. We're going to rename it later. And of course, in order to do that, you know what? Let's get this onto the clipboard. But we need to inherit. That's the one thing, view component base. That's all we need to. And let's come back over here. Okay, it's happy. We need the route. And that's pretty simple. Okay. Why is this giving me the updating the base class required restart? Oh, restart. Of course it does. Let me close that. It always gets me. All right, bulletins, and we can basically just steal this code, move it over because it's all controlling logic. So the bulletins we're going to rename to underscore. And of course, we need our we need to inject the just like in the fetch data controller. So we're gonna do that here. We can do controller injection, constructor injection. Actually, not on Blazor components. We have to do a property injection. That's a good point. Controllers are components. These all Blazor components just compile down to classes. So this controller component, it is a component as well. Okay, client, and we're going to call it HTTP get set, and then of course we're going to inject. All right, now we do our using statement. The URI for our web services is right there. now we have the data. Say view.model equals bulletins. All right, let's code forward. So we're going to create the property in Face Church Bulletin. There we go. And now we just have to retrofit this. And this sets us up so that any interaction goes here. Okay, let's see if this compiles. Did I forget anything? Control F5. Okay, this works, fetch data works, and loading from a database works. All right, so now let me, you know what? We're gonna do something. We're gonna do something here just to show the UI bus in another episode. This one's running long, so this is implementing BlazorMvc. We have split everything. We now, oh, I forgot one thing. The rename to have a view suffix by convention. There we go. Just to keep the save. Let's go ahead and clean up that using statement. And I'm pressing Control Shift Alt F, which is just a generic cleanup. Okay, so that's that. Control F5. Okay, and everything still works. Yes. All right, now I have refactored to model view controller, the model view controller pattern here. Last episode, we ran some acceptance tests. So I'm running, and let's just see if these full system acceptance tests still work. So I'm not going to go through this. Go to the last episode if you want to see this. But you know what? Let's just, I did some refactoring. It's always good to run all of the tests. Of course, we have unit tests and integration tests. But this is a full system test that pops open a Chrome browser and clicks on a button. Click, and well, it looks like it's happy so far. Yeah, it clicked on the button and made sure we incremented to 1. So that's good. I'll go ahead and commit my changes over to my branch. And I always like to tag it with issue number 10. Refactored components to BlazorMvc. And I always like to look at what I'm doing, intentionally look at what I'm doing. And anytime I see that the CSproj file has changed, I really want to know what it's doing. So I look at compare with unmodified. I don't want any accidental changes. These are super important files. And so the only change is adding the NuGet package. Yep, that's exactly what I expected. And so now I'm comfortable. Okay. Sometimes we'll do some things and we'll accidentally upgrade a NuGet package. And if that was not intentional, then you want to really look at that. Okay, commit all and push. Okay, and then of course you want to go over to the build server and you want to make sure that your build works. This is not about private builds per se here, but my workflow, actually I skipped a step. You really do want to come to your private build and run it. So let's open file and File Explorer, actually go up to top, click to build.bat. And we've had previous episodes go through the private build and all that, compiling and running unit tests and running component level integration. Oh, it looks like I have some, yeah, I got some warnings I got to clean up. Oh, we'll clean those up because we don't want to have warnings. But you can see my test coverage running in the build, creating my database using MS SQL local DB, and the results of my code coverage so far, which just a few tests in the sample application. And the build took 20 seconds. Okay. All right, you can see all of this on the Git repository. And I think we are done for now. So that was pretty quick, wasn't it? Refactoring to BlazorMvc. Obviously, several of those components were from the default template, but it's not any big deal. All we're doing is creating regular classes that are controllers, but they, at the same time, are Blazor components. They compile straight down into the same old Blazor components that the .razor files do. But it's as simple as that. We want to keep our controlling logic, the logic that works with data, the logic that makes decisions. We want that to be separate from files that have HTML, that have formatting code in them. And it's just as simple as that. And also, the controllers go onto the call stack first. And so, if we want to have logic that decides between one view or the other, we can do that. So, you saw all that. All the code is there. GitHub.com/Jeffrey Palermo. You can get the code, pull it down, play with it. Also, BlazorMvc is open source, and you can pull that code down as well and see it. So, thanks so much. God bless you, and thanks for programming with Palermo.
You've been watching Programming with Palermo, your primary place for highly productive programming protocols and practices. Remember, you have what it takes. You can do this. You are a programmer, formed by God Himself and called to this profession for a purpose. You can catch every episode at Palermo.network, as well as syndicated locations nationwide. We're so glad you tuned in. Until next time, may God bless you, and thanks for Programming with Palermo. Programming with Palermo has made a special arrangement with Marketplace Chaplains. Besides programming challenges, we all face issues in life where we need some help. If you'd like, you can call a chaplain confidentially. To speak with a gentleman, dial 512-923-8178. Or to speak with a lady, dial 512-619-6950. The show won't know you called, and everything is kept in strict secrecy. This is a free service, available if you or a friend need it.